All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. I see Brian Peterson with your hand up first. Go ahead, Brian.
Coach, the two things that had seemed to be most successful for you all season were not there against Oregon, the getting to the line and rebounding. I'm assuming that was a big emphasis in practice this week. When it comes to the getting to the line, how do you coach managing to get to the line?
No, that's Brian. That's a very good question. It's not like we strategically, have that at the top of our list. It's more of the personnel that we have on our team, where the ball gets to in our offense leads to fouls. And I think that when we're playing at our best, we get a lot of drives and transition, a lot of offensive rebounds. We get post ups, and when you get all three of those things, that leads to fouls. But the fact that I think at the moment we score the most points per game from the free throw line, it's really an incredible stat. It really is. It's almost as if you have that going for you, you wonder why we don't have more wins, because it's really a big stat. But we like to have balance, and you're right. I credit Oregon. They did a good job of not fouling us. They have a different scheme and a different style of defense. And it isn't like they got away with fouls that weren't called. It was more along the lines of they did an excellent job of not fouling us. And you're right, they took that strength away from our offense. However, we still did a lot of other good things on offense, which includes playing the entire game with only 6 turnovers. Oregon turns you over. They get more steals than anybody in our conference. If you could play that 40-minute game with only 6 turnovers, that's really a big thing. But we weren't able to do it. And the other part of your question about rebounding, that's always a key stat for us because of the way we play, and the fact they out rebounded us 38-30. They got some key second shots, and when you do that, you really leave yourself vulnerable. And they punched the game out really like they have. I know they've beaten us 6 times in a row. But it's really unique because of the 6, I'd say 4 of them really came down to like the single last play of the game. And we've not been on the positive end of that, which, I have to own that. We have to own that. That's not okay. But I think you also have to credit Oregon for being able to put us away on those last plays.
And getting back to the free throws, UCLA lived at the line when you played them last time, and you spoke at length about that after the game, about how your defense made it so that you had to foul them because they got themselves in great position. You've been better in some games lately. The Oregon game was one of those as well. How do you avoid not getting in that situation again?
No, and you're right. We've really tried very, very hard to foul less, to make them score from the field. Fouling, it has so many problems within the game. Gets you to your bench, takes you sometimes out of your best players being available. You give them the free points. Our Pac-12 this year, I don't have the history in front of me, but we have an incredible free throw shooting team league. Have you looked at that at all? I know Colorado is threatening maybe to break an all-time NCAA record, but we're in the middle, towards the middle to the bottom, and actually our free throw percentage, it isn't terrible. I mean, we're in the 70s. So, but you're right. That was a big part of the game. They drove us. They really picked on our 4-man, and it wasn't just him. It was our guards. We just got beat off the dribble. And, the combination of Jalen Hill and Cody Riley inside, they're physical players. UCLA will get them the ball. They offensive rebound. But free throw differential was a big reason we lost to UCLA the first time. And I think that's something that we hope to be better at here this week.
Thank you.
Ryan Calapier, go ahead.
Other than win, what are you hoping to accomplish in these last 4 games, or what are your goals for these last 4 games?
I mean, it's really what you said. I mean, we want to finish strong. We want to be ready at every game, want to play well, want to finish this season strong. to be able to have as many total wins as we can. We've had 2 tough ones in the last 3, at Colorado and here home against Oregon. And when you have that, I think you have to take the good and the bad. Bad's obvious. The good is that, look, we're right there, and there's things that we can do better. And if we do those things better, we have a chance to beat some very good teams. When you go to LA, those games are always difficult. And, we're hoping that we can play really well in both games. And the outcome, that will take care of itself. But we're also not sitting around here, legs crossed, saying, hey, we don't have a postseason. We've known that for a long, long time. We go to practice. I'll only speak on the practice we just had or the practice we had the last 2 days. Did a good job. I think if you were at the practice, you would look at our group as hardworking, together, competing. And we've been that type of team all year long. And when you do that, a lot of times that leads into the next game or the next week. We weren't a group that was hanging our head, that was dysfunctional, that was saying, I can't believe we have nothing to play for. And that's a credit to every player that's on our team. So we'll see how the game starts. The other part for us, especially those 2 games, Colorado and Oregon, got off to really bad starts. Home 11-2. We were down against Oregon, and what was it, 19-2 at Colorado. Got to get off to a better start, got to be more ready, got to make better plays early in those games. You dig yourself that hole, you're playing really good basketball, but you're just climbing that mountain for the entire first half. So my hope is that we can do a better job starting both of these games this week.
And when you look at the amount of young talent you have on the roster, what excites you the most about the future of this program?
Well, we recruited differently the last couple of years. Some of you guys do a great job covering that. I think you know what I mean, trying to get really talented young players, but the young players that can grow and develop, maybe go from a good freshman to an all-conference sophomore to maybe somebody who has an opportunity to play in the NBA. And I don't have a crystal ball in front of me, but as you've now had the opportunity to see Kerr play more, I think you can see why we value him and feel like he's going to be a very good player. He's already helped us in the 4 games he's played, but sometimes, if Christian Coloco is in there, we have 3 freshmen and Christian, who started playing in 7th grade. And so clearly I think those guys all have a future. But you know what? We're not there yet. I know after the game, you asked me about the big picture. Like, there can't be a big picture right now. It's about, can we go to UCLA and play really well and have a chance to win? And, we're Arizona, and, when you lose, it's never fun.
Bruce Pascoe, you're up next.
Sean, you mentioned, talking about the close game at Oregon, and then coming up with this one on Thursday. UCLA is 9-1, I think, in 1 or 2 possession games. You guys are 3-4, losing a few of them lately. What do you think that, do you think a lot of that's just what UCLA went through last year, getting used to Cronin, and do they have an experience advantage over you guys that you think factors in there? Or, and I know going back to when you played him in the A-10, I mean, were his teams always like that, or does this, what do you think of it?
Meaning the ability to win close games?
Yeah, exactly. Closing out close games. Has there been a historic edge, or do you think it's just a factor of they have a lot of experienced guys this year?
No, I mean, I think you have to give Mick and his coaching staff a lot of credit. When you constantly win those close ones, you're doing a lot of things right as a basketball team, program, but also, you have a coaching staff that's very sure of themselves, that obviously is pressing the right buttons. And by the way, you could press the right buttons and still lose. The player, and, Duarte is a great example. That was kind of like a broken play. We didn't make a smart move. We left him. But he still has to make the shot, and he did. And sometimes those games are won and lost by players that can really close out those types of situations. But the other part with UCLA is they're in a lot of close games too. And, I think that's the other way of looking at it. And that's not to discredit them, but, they're grinding some of these games out and getting you to that last 4 minutes and making key plays. So we have to be ready. My hope is that it is one of those games and we give ourselves the opportunity to win. Anytime you're in LA playing away from home against that type of team, you have to play well. And I would say that that's it. Like, we're not going to go there and win the game by playing mediocre. We have to play really, really good. And, I think the other part for me, as we come down the home stretch of this season, I look at our statistics very closely. And if you would have told me in, early fall that we would be number one in America in points from the free throw line in Pac-12 games, that we score the most points of any team in the Pac-12, especially this year, man, I would have probably taken that bet if you would have bet me, because, we had a lot of change and a lot of new faces, and we're counting on a lot of young players. We have won a lot of games, and we have played some very good offense. You may say, Coach, I wish you did this. I look at our three-point percentage, and we're at 39%. We don't depend on the three, so we don't shoot as many three-point shots as some other teams, but that's good too. Our turnovers, you look at our turnovers per game, assist-to-turnover ratio, man, we just have a lot of good statistics. Our problem has been the development of our defense. And, there's been games where we've had stretches, but I can almost point to every loss in the Pac-12 where we had the ability to get key stops. Sometimes it's secure a defensive rebound. Sometimes it's to finish the possession without fouling. Sometimes it's to be smarter and not leave Duarte, to defend the three-point shot better. But we've not been able to do that. And we continue to work on it. We've worked on it really the last three days, whether it's drills, film, full court. And, again, sometimes you just got to keep hitting that rock and then you break through. But if we had some improved defense with continued offense like we've had, we would be a team that really nobody wants to play in the Pac-12. It's just we haven't been able to be as good on defense clearly as we are on offense. So that remains our challenge. You ask about the last 4 games. That's at the top of the list. Can we foul less? Can we rebound better? Can we be, more responsible, get overall better team play on defense, and continue to be good on offense? So that's what we're working towards.
Yeah. So when you look back, I mean, you mentioned the early deficits against Oregon and Colorado. Is that a bigger deal in your mind than the last play with the, everyone's talking about James can't get into it, and then you get inbound and Kerr has a tough shot? I mean, basically, is that what you're saying, that you could just avoid that in the first place, or would there still be you'd like to see at the end? I mean,
Bruce, you kind of know the answer I'm going to give, and I just think it's the right answer. That everybody's critical of the end, and I understand that.
Yeah.
And you're also very, gracious if it goes well. What a great last shot, play, etc. But every play of the game has equal meaning. You're right. If the deficit is 7-6, not 11-2, you can make the argument that maybe you're in a different dilemma in the last 4 minutes. Finishing the first half, early in the second half, coming out after the break and being ready. Although all those moments and segments of the game, they're all the same. And what I'll tell you about the last play, you guys just have to understand that if it's quarter court side out of bounds against Oregon, number one, are they going to be in zone or man? That's something to really consider, because you want to have something that works against both, because nobody says they have to play man-to-man and no one says they have to play zone. They can do either. With 1 second left, if you could get a shot mean, that's what every coach wants. If you could get a decent shot with 1 point something, wow. And if you could ever get a shot where you could get fouled, and what I would tell you is on that catch, if Kerr jumps sideways in the air and shoots it, he's probably going to go to the foul line like Josh Green did a year ago to win or lose the game there. You know, and again, Kerr is a young player, but I like what we got, and we had a chance. It didn't work. So when it doesn't work, there's really nothing to talk about, you know. I'll also tell you that when it's our ball at 15 seconds full court, you got to remember this. Oregon, they had a foul to give. So no matter what play you draw up, you have to take into consideration that they may not let that play happen simply because at that point they had a foul to give. Number two, Oregon presses. You got to be careful in calling any play because you don't have a guarantee that they're not going to press, right? So it's just, there's a lot going on, especially with a younger group. You know, and then, you know, are they going to be in zone or man? And at the end, I can really live with what we did. It's no fun when you lose, but it's just like kind of Oregon's situation coming out of their timeout. They ran a play in which you call hammer. Believe it or not, we actually defended the play. The reason that Duarte was wide open is we made an error, just left him for no reason. And to Duarte's credit, he drilled the three-point shot. But in terms of us coming out of that timeout, being alert, not giving them a shot off of a play that was called, and we did a lot of things correct. It's just that was the sixth loss in a row. And, you know, it feels like 100, and you don't make the shot and they do, you have to live with it. You know, I understand that. But so as we give feedback to our team, again, my only point would be there is some good. There is some that you can learn from. And if we find ourselves in these situations this week, number one, we would have to play really well to be in that situation. And then maybe we break through, you know, like we did at Arizona State, you know, in a couple games that we were able to win on the road or, you know, winning close games. We haven't lost all of them. It certainly feels that way. I understand.
One other thing, if I could just ask you, you mentioned, you know, talking about 4 remaining games. Do you think it's going to be only 4, or do you get any word that you might play Oregon again? I mean, I understand there was a coaches meeting last night. I didn't know if that came up at all or where that stands.
No, you know, I think the conference is going to protect itself to get the most teams in postseason. And, you know, I don't know the answer to the question. Nobody has said no. Nobody has said yes. But if I'm doing the math, you know, I don't know if that last week is as clear cut as maybe it once was, because I think any team that's in the NCAA tournament has to have 7 consecutive days of negative tests, right? So I think our conference has to do the best they can of taking care of those teams that are in that situation. And I don't know where we stack up. If we're needed, clearly we would love to play, but I don't really have the answer to that. We have to go on the 4 that we definitely know we're playing, and then after that, we'll cross that bridge.
Yeah, thanks.
Jason Shear, you're up.
Hey, Coach. Kind of going back to the other point, how much is of defense is either you kind of have it or you don't? Like, how much better do you think you can get through coaching and all that?
Well, with the young group, you have more of an upside. You know, some of that has been taken from us, Jason, and I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir. We're not the only team that's dealing with COVID, but you know, the way it's set up in the shortening of the season, some of that development, you know, you're not going to really get to maybe, but you have to get better at certain things. And the scary part is, believe it or not, we have. I'll use Azuolas as an example. If you were at every practice for the first 2 weeks of our season, there was a big learning curve and adjustment for him coming from FIBA, another country, to college basketball as a freshman. where he is today, and my hope is that you'll actually see that against UCLA, that he's more prepared and better individually than maybe he was when we played him the first time. Ditto for Kerr. So if you use Kerr as the example, you know what I'm going to say. If he's on game 21, I think he would be a little further along than maybe he is right now in game 5. But some of it is we are a small team. Defense, if you're shooting over Rondé, Hollis, Jefferson, that's a whole different look than shooting over a 6'2" guard. Christian Coloco, he's 4th in the conference in blocks. He's our overall best defensive player. There are plays he makes on defense that just we don't really have another guy that can make those plays because Christian's 7 feet, 7'4" wingspan, quick. He's in his second year. But there are things through just a year older, getting bigger and stronger, an entire offseason, and then recruiting that can help us a little bit. But the analogy I would give you is that small, young defensive line, you can get better, but there's a ceiling that it doesn't matter what you do until you fix a couple things or guys get 20 pounds heavier or you get more depth on the defensive line. It kind of is what it is. And I would say that our talent on this year's team is sided more towards the offensive end than the defensive end. And I would say the same thing about our guards. Terrell and James, sometimes they're giving great effort, but when Jules Bernard rises up, 6 foot versus 6'5", and that's something that we have to address in the future. But our size hurts us on defense, no doubt about it.
And then the NCAA extended the dead period to the end of May now. How does that impact, everything with recruiting and kind of set you guys back, or really every team in the country?
Well, actually for us, we're not going to have the normal turnover that we've had the last 3 years. It doesn't, in my opinion, hurt us as much as it would if we were losing, what we have. I go back and you talk about defense or just recruiting, and this is what it is. It's something that we have to improve and fix. And I think we've taken a big step forward in already fixing it. But if you go back 4 years ago, we started Parker Jackson Cartwright, Alonzo Trier, Raleigh Alkins, DeAndre Ayton, and Dusan Ristich. All 5 starters departed. And for all the reasons that you guys know, we had a very unique offseason, and then we replaced that group. And, you kind of name the names there. Justin Coleman, Ryan Luther, Brandon Randolph was a starter, kind of go through that. We lost, 3 or 4 of those guys. A year ago, at this time, our starting lineup would be Nico Mannion, Dylan Smith, Josh Green, Stone Gettings, and Zeke Najee. We lost all 5. It's not easy. It's not, I don't think, to anyone's advantage to have that happen. But I do believe that this year that turnover won't be nearly like it was. And I think that some of our younger players in particular have a huge upside waiting them. So I think some of the recruiting that you guys are used to seeing is going to be adjusted. And, my hope is that we can get more experienced, retention being more at the top of the list, mixing in certainly players each and every spring, each and every fall, but not all 5 starters, not 8 or 9 scholarship players. And that will really be to our advantage. Trust me. Some of the defensive things that we can get better at, that experience, that returning experience, that will solve that. But look, we're not at that point right now, so our focus is to be ready for UCLA. But I think what you're getting at with that question is some of my answer. And so that's how I see that.
Thanks, Coach.
Justin Spears, you're up.
here coming up in the next couple of days, Coach. It'll be the 10-year anniversary of the Derrick Williams block against Washington. Looking back, what do you remember about that game?
I remember looking down at Lorenzo Romar and saying, man, that was a great block. And he kind of looked at me and said, you sure it wasn't a goaltend? That was, you talk about a 50-50 play that changed a lot. You know, God was on our side that day. He's been against us recently, but that shot right there, it was a trajectory of a lot of great things to follow. And, you know, I look at Derrick in those 2 years, and, you know, he's another example of what Jason just asked me, and that is when we got Derrick, we knew we got a very talented young player, but there were a number of people back then that would have asked, are you going to redshirt him? Or like, how are you going to play that? Because that's how he was ranked. That's kind of who he was. Nobody could have ever predicted that he would become the number 2 pick in the draft and do what he did in his second year for us, even his first year. You know, it's just, that's the hardest part about recruiting. You know, sometimes things happen, and that was like a great thing. But if you follow us that third year, one of the reasons that we fell is you could have never predicted Derrick almost leaving school. You know, we weren't prepared for his early departure. But yeah, Derrick on that day, man, I wish I could go back in time. That was one of those magical days when you had 14,500. I think it was a whiteout. You know, it was just like unbelievable weather. Everybody was happy, and it was a great win. I also think we won the Pac-10 on that game. So, yeah.
Thank you.
That seems like 27 years ago.
I was going to ask you, you know, you talking about when Derrick first came in and people were asking you about redshirting him. From our perspective, not a lot of people expected Ben Matheson to have such a big role this year. Is he kind of a similar case?
Yes, very much so. And I think the couple of things they share, you know, both athletically are just spectacular. I mean, we see things on a daily basis, Ben, that are just a sign of things to come. I mean, his ability to run, jump, stop, turn, how he's built, how he will change dramatically in the next 6 months because he's only 18. You know, remember Derrick physically, he could not bench press 185 pounds once. And I know when he went to the NBA Combine, after his second year, he led the Combine, if I'm not mistaken, and he did it like 21 times. I mean, his body just like blew up. And Ben's going to do that as well. And the other thing is both were just very skilled. You know, if you watch Derrick shoot and dribble and it was easy for him. And, you know, you watch Ben, I know they're a different position, but Ben does that. He has that same ease. It's like you watch him shoot it, and it's like he's in slow motion. So definitely some similarities in both of those guys.
Thank you.
All right, we'll do 2 more, Rich Herrera and Bruce Pascoe. Rich, you're up first.
Thank you very much. Coach, how are you this afternoon?
Fine.
Good. Follow up on the continuity question that you had talked about a little bit earlier. I know it's a small sample size, but since the 9 games since you last saw the Bruins, obviously Kirk Reese changes the outlook of the team. But how much has your team grown in these last 9 tough games that you've played?
I do believe, Rich, that we're better. You know, we've been a very consistent offensive team. You know, obviously we've watched our game 1 against UCLA and our game 1 against USC. And, you know, I think that each of those coaches would agree with what I'm saying. But, you know, we scored. You know, we played good offense. And against USC, James and Jamal didn't have their normal output shooting. I think they were 1 for 16, but we still scored, you know, and but we also really struggled against their offense. So I do think we're better. I think we're better because, you know, losing Jamal really hurt us, but now having Kerr available really helps us. And hopefully we can feel that this week.
One of the things we talked about in the post-game show after the first UCLA game was their ability to drive. When you're watching film, what are some of the things you want to see tightened up as far as the rotation and the pack line preventing UCLA from trying to drive to the basket?
Well, we just can't get spread out. You know, it's not just the player defending the ball, but it's our help defenders. And, you know, UCLA has a very good way of keeping you engaged in screens. And next thing you know, like, they have a lot of space to drive. They always have 4 perimeter players on the court. So that also lends itself to like more open space. But I'll also tell you, the more you worry about drives and their 4 perimeter players, you know, Cody Riley, and he hasn't been 100% recently, which I think's hurt them. But when he's healthy, he is a monster down low. And I don't know Jalen Hill's status, but the two of them, you know, there's a reason UCLA is really good. And that combination at center has worked. And I know they have a couple younger players they're playing at the 5 if Hill's not available, and they're getting better as well. But, you know, you can't just focus on the perimeter. You have to deal with Cody Riley as well.
Thank you so much.
We'll wrap things up with Bruce Pascoe. Bruce, you're up.
Sean, I was going to ask you about UCLA too, and just you touched on some of their. I think has been the, you know, change for them. Anything you've noticed since you played them last that's changed? I think Hill is apparently still not with them, and like you said, Riley's limited. Obviously, Zhu Zhang had a great weekend. Anything that struck you, you know, watching recent games of them?
Yeah, no, I think Johnny Juzang's emergence as a great scorer really presents a challenge. I mean, he is playing with more confidence. He's more experienced. I think he's really improved, and he can really score. He scored against us the first time. And I think, like, his trajectory was starting around that period of time, but he's a heck of a player. He's a heck of an offensive player. That's one thing. And then, you know, I think sometimes what gets lost in the shuffle with them is, you know, you got to remember they lost arguably the conference's best player. If he's not the best player, he is one of the best players, Chris Smith. And they've learned to play without him. But, you know, when everybody predicted UCLA as our conference champion and you started to think about UCLA, you know, the first name that you would think about is him. And I think they've done a remarkable job of playing without him. And, you know, they're still very good, but, you know, there's no taking away that they lost a key player.
And finally, just wondering, how's Ira doing? Is he back with you in practice, and what's his status for? Okay.
Ira's practiced all 3 days, and we expect him to be available and playing.
Does that make a difference, particularly against UCLA? You know, it sounds like, you know, again, if they don't have Hill, maybe, you know, you've got a fouling advantage. I know Cronin was talking yesterday about, he was really concerned about their you know, vulnerability against the fouls inside. And, you know, could that help you maybe that way?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're a deeper team with Ira. We're a more versatile team. You know, what's the best thing Ira does is he rebounds. He gives you energy. You know, Ira's from Los Angeles. So this is will be the, you know, you look at it, one of the last times that he has a chance to play in LA against these two teams. So I'm glad we have him for sure.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you tomorrow night after the game.